In a small town, where dreams gather dust like old car parts, two broken spirits are about to collide. She was a track star, with Olympic potential, now watching the world from behind a van's windshield. He was a racing prodigy who traded the spotlight for a quiet life under the hood. When 17-year-old Ava Ruiz loses both her legs in a devastating crash, she believes her story is over. But fate has other plans when she catches the eye of Leo, a reclusive mechanic carrying his own weight of abandoned dreams. In his weathered hands, spare parts become something more, a chance at redemption, not just for her, but for them both. Could a man who gave up on his own dreams help a young athlete find her way back to the starting line? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn painted the sky in hushed purples when Ava Ruiz first discovered her gift. She was 5, racing her shadow across her mother's garden, feet barely touching the ground between the rows of tomatoes. Maria Ruiz watched from the kitchen window. Coffee cup paused halfway to her lips as her daughter moved with an effortless grace that seemed to defy gravity itself. That same grace now filled the trophy case in their modest living room. 12 years of early mornings, scraped knees, and unshakable determination captured in metal and marble. Maria had polished each one just last week, her fingers lingering on the most recent edition. State championships, first place, 400-meter sprint. "Mama, you'll wear the engraving off if you keep cleaning them," Ava would tease, but Maria knew her daughter smiled every time she passed that case. Each trophy told a story, not just of victories, but of the quiet moments between. The dawn practices, when Ava's breath frosted the air, her footprints the only marks on the dew-dampened track. The afternoon spent icing shin splints while completing calculus homework, because Maria had insisted that education would always run parallel to athletics. Coach Thompson had seen it first, that spark of something extraordinary. "Your daughter," he'd told Maria during a parent-teacher conference when Ava was in 7th grade, "she doesn't just run. She speaks to the wind, and it listens." He'd pulled out a folder thick with timing sheets and training plans. With the right guidance, she could go all the way, Olympics. The word had hung in the air like a prayer. Maria had taken on a second job at the hospital, moving from day shift to nights in the emergency room, just to afford the private coaching sessions. Ava never knew. Her mother made sure of that. The only thing Maria asked in return was that Ava push herself not just on the track, but in the classroom too, and push she did. At 17, Ava balanced AP classes with training schedules that would have broken lesser spirits. Her life moved to the rhythm of spike-clad feet against rubber track. The whisper of physics textbook pages turned late into the night, and the steady beep of her mother's alarm clock as Maria headed to another graveyard shift. The morning of the qualifying meet dawned clear and cool, perfect conditions for making history. Ava stood at her bedroom window, fingers wrapped around the St. Christopher medal her grandmother had given her before passing. The rising sun caught the metal, sending fractured light dancing across her walls. Below, she could hear her mother, in the kitchen, probably making those energy-packed breakfast burritos that had become their race day tradition. "Just another day at the office," Ava whispered to herself, but her heart knew better. This wasn't just another meet. The Olympic trials scout would be there, clipboard in hand, watching for that special something that separated the good from the great. One race to prove Coach Thompson right, to make her mother's sacrifices worth every extra hour spent keeping other people's children alive in the ER. She pulled her hair back tight, the way she always did before competition, each stroke of the brush a meditation. The mirror reflected back a face caught between childhood and womanhood, high cheekbones like her mother's, determined jaw like the father she'd never known. Her track uniform hung pressed and ready on the closet door, the school colors bold, against the white walls of her bedroom. "Ava," Maria's voice floated up the stairs. "Breakfast is ready, mi amor." "Coming, Mama." She took one last look at herself. at the girl who'd spent thousands of hours preparing for this single morning. In less than 6 hours, everything would change, though not in any way she could have imagined. The memory came in fragments, like a film missing crucial frames. The tang of nervous sweat beneath her track uniform, the weight of her race bib, pinned perfectly straight. Number 218, her lucky numbers. Coach Thompson's last-minute instructions, fading into the familiar pre-race hum of her pulse in her ears. Her mother in the stands, wearing the red scarf she'd worn to every major meet since Ava was 12. Then the drive home. Maria had offered to take her to celebrate, but Ava wanted to change first, to wash away the disappointment of a race that had been good, but not good enough. Not for the Olympic trials scout who'd packed up his clipboard before her event had even finished. The truck came from nowhere. Or maybe she'd been too lost in replaying every millisecond of her performance to notice it run the red light. The world tilted. Metal screamed against metal. In that eternal moment before impact, Ava had a singular, crystal-clear thought. She'd forgotten to thank Coach Thompson for coming in early all those mornings. The rest was a carousel of blurred images and sharp sensations. Pavement glittering with broken glass like a mockery of her morning's frost-covered track. The taste of copper, a paramedic's face, lined with concern, swimming in and out of focus. Her mother's voice, raw and desperate, somewhere in the whiteness that followed. She woke to the steady rhythm of hospital machinery, a pale echo of the heartbeat that had guided her around countless tracks. The room smelled of antiseptic and something else. Fear, maybe, or grief. Maria sat slumped in a chair, still wearing her scrubs from work, but now as a mother instead of a nurse. The sight was wrong somehow, like a photograph turned upside down. "Mama?" Her voice cracked and Maria startled awake, years of ER experience evaporating in the face of personal tragedy. "Mi cielo," her mother breathed, reaching for her hand. "Gracias a Dios." But God, it seemed, had only been partially listening that day. The doctor came in, his face arranged in that careful expression medical professionals reserve for life-altering. News. Ava recognized it from watching her mother practice difficult conversations in their bathroom mirror. He spoke of trauma and tissue damage, of microsurgery and rehabilitation. Words like bilateral amputation and prosthetic options floated in the air like autumn leaves, beautiful and dead and impossible to catch. Ava heard them all with perfect clarity, but they seemed to be about someone else. Some other girl who'd had the misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The reality didn't hit until 3 days later, when they finally let her sit, up enough to see past the blankets, where her legs should have been, the legs that had carried her to state championships, that had been her ticket to a future bigger than their small town. There was only empty space below her knees. Her race bib, salvaged from her ruined uniform, lay crumpled on the bedside table. Maria had tried to smooth it out, but the creases remained, deep and permanent as the changes in Ava's life. The numbers that had seemed lucky just days ago now looked like a cruel joke. "We'll get through this," Maria promised, her voice steady, even as tears tracked down her cheeks. "Together, mi amor, like always." But Ava couldn't answer. She was remembering every finish line she'd ever crossed, every moment her feet had lifted her above the ordinary world. The memory of wind in her hair and power in her stride felt like a story she'd read about someone else, a story with an ending she no longer knew. That night, after her mother had finally been convinced to go home and rest, Ava lay awake in the artificial twilight of the hospital room. Outside her window, the world continued its normal rhythm. Ambulances arriving, staff changing shifts, life moving forward with the same certainty that had once marked her own steps on the track. She thought of her trophy case at home, of the medals and ribbons that now seemed to belong to a different lifetime. What do you become when the thing that defined you is suddenly gone? The question echoed in her mind, unanswered, as morphine pulled her under into a dreamless sleep. Leo Martinez's hands never shook anymore when he worked on engines. 23 years of grease and gears had worn away the tremors that once plagued him after the crash at Daytona. These days, his fingers moved with the steady precision of a surgeon, each motion born from muscle memory and the quiet wisdom of mistakes long past. The trophy still sat in his office, though most visitors assumed it was just another piece of shop decoration. Third place, 1999, NASCAR Nationwide Series. The gold-plated driver figure had lost its luster under years of dust, but Leo couldn't bring himself to clean it. Sometimes, late at night, when paperwork kept him at the shop, he'd catch its reflection in his computer screen, a ghost of what might have been. "You were the next Dale Earnhardt," his former manager had said, the words bitter with disappointment. Had the skill, had the nerve, hell, even had the look. But skill and nerve meant nothing when fear got its hooks in you. The first time Leo climbed back into a race car after the accident, his hands had trembled so badly he couldn't grip the wheel. The shop, Martinez Auto Repair, wasn't what he'd dreamed of as a teenager sleeping under posters of stock cars. But there was honor in it, he'd learned. Dignity in fixing what others had written off as broken. His reputation for handling the impossible cases had spread through 3 counties. People brought him their lost causes, vintage engines seized with rust, transmissions that other mechanics had declared hopeless, classics that needed someone who understood their particular quirks. Each morning, he arrived before sunrise, just as he had for track practice all those years ago. The ritual remained the same. Coffee from his battered thermos, radio tuned to the oldies station, work orders sorted by priority. His employees knew not to arrive before 8. These early hours belonged to Leo and the machines. The windows of his office held a few faded photographs, memories preserved behind glass. Leo at 19, fire suit pristine, standing beside his first professional race car. His father, gone. Now 10 years, teaching him to change oil in their cramped garage. The team celebrating after his first major win, champagne frozen mid-spray. He kept them as reminders, though of what he wasn't always sure. Sometimes during long afternoons, when the shop hummed with the sound of air wrenches and diagnostic computers, Leo would catch himself listening for the roar of engines pushing 300 miles per hour. The smell of race fuel still lived somewhere in his memory, distinct from the more mundane aromas of motor oil and brake cleaner that now filled his days. The younger mechanics occasionally asked about the racing photos, their curiosity piqued by glimpses of his past life. Leo had developed a talent for deflection, for steering conversations back to timing belts and torque specifications. Better to focus on the present, on the things he could control with these steady hands that had once gripped a steering wheel with such certainty. His small office told the story in scattered details. Textbooks on automotive engineering shared shelf space with outdated racing magazines. A half-finished sketch for a custom suspension modification lay partially covered by invoices. In the corner, a stack of racing periodicals gathered dust, renewal notices long since expired. The local paper had run a story about him once. 5 years after he'd left the circuit. "Local racing star opens auto shop," the headline had read, as if opening a repair business was the natural evolution of a crashed dream. Leo had kept the article, folded and tucked away in his desk drawer, though he'd never read it all the way through. Each year, when the big races rolled around, customers would sometimes try to draw him out, asking for stories from his racing days. Leo had mastered the art of the non-committal smile, the gentle redirect. "These days," he'd say, gesturing to whatever vehicle sat on his lift, "I prefer to keep all 4 wheels on the ground." But late at night, when the shop was empty and the only sound was the tick of cooling engines, Leo would sometimes find himself standing in front of that dusty trophy, remembering the weight of a helmet, the grip of leather gloves, the perfect moment when car and driver moved as one. In those quiet moments, he'd allow himself to wonder about paths not taken, about the fine line between caution and cowardice, about the difference between surviving and living. The van had been her mother's idea. Independence, Maria had called it, the word heavy with hope and expectation. To Ava, it felt more like surrender, trading running shoes for wheel wells, starting blocks for hand controls. But it was the van that brought her to Leo's shop on a Tuesday morning in October, when the check engine light blinked to life like an accusation. She'd seen the sign countless times before, Martinez Auto Repair, the letters faded but still dignified against the weathered brick. Now, sitting in the customer parking lot, Ava watched the morning routine through her windshield. Mechanics arriving with travel mugs and lunch coolers, the wide garage doors rolling up to greet the dawn, the first customers dropping off their keys with cheerful familiarity. The work order sat blank in her lap, pen hovering over the line marked "Customer Description of Problem." How to describe a problem that went so much deeper than a warning light? After 45 minutes of watching, she set the clipboard aside, put the van in reverse, and that's when the engine died completely. Leo noticed her from his office window, the young woman in the handicap-equipped van who'd been sitting in his lot since sunrise. Something in her stillness caught his attention, reminded him of the quiet hours before a race when every decision felt monumental. He watched her failed attempt to restart the engine, saw the subtle slump of her shoulders that spoke of defeat too familiar to be purely mechanical. The coffee in his cup had gone cold by the time he made his decision. The bell above the office had announced his exit with the same bright note it had chimed for 23 years. "Need a hand?" His voice carried across the lot, gentle but clear. Ava started at the sound, her fingers tightening on the useless key. Through the side mirror, she caught fragments of his approach: work boots, blue coveralls, silver threading through dark hair at the temples. Not young, but not old either. Something about his careful steps suggested he was used to approaching things that might spook easily. "It's nothing," she said, the words automatic. "I was just leaving." Leaving might be ambitious without a running engine. He stopped a respectful distance from her window. I'm Leo Martinez. This is my shop." She didn't roll down the window, but she did turn to face him fully. His eyes were kind in a way that made her immediately wary. She'd seen enough. Kind eyes in hospital rooms to last a lifetime. "The check engine light came on," she said finally, "but I can call a tow truck." "Could do that," Leo agreed, studying the van with professional interest. "Or I could take a look now, save you the tow fee. Your choice." Something in his tone caught her attention. No pity, no excessive cheerfulness, just the matter-of-fact courtesy of one mechanic to another. Because that's how he was speaking to her, she realized. Like someone who might understand engines, not like a broken thing needing to be fixed. The work order crinkled in her grip. "You're probably busy." "Always am." He shrugged, the gesture comfortable as old denim. "But I've got a theory about this. Engine I'd like to test. Would you mind helping me prove a point?" It was skillfully done, recasting her presence as assistance rather than need. Ava recognized the technique. She'd used similar strategies with younger runners she'd once coached. The memory should have stung, but something about Leo's patient stance beside her van made it feel more like a nudge toward possibility. "What kind of theory?" she found herself asking. "About fuel pressure sensors in this model." He produced a tablet from his pocket, pulled up a diagnostic diagram. "Mind if I show you?" The tablet appeared in her line of sight, held at an angle that invited collaboration rather than instruction. On the screen, the engine schematic looked like a puzzle waiting to be solved, complex but not incomprehensible. Ava hesitated, then rolled down her window. The morning air carried the scent of coffee and motor oil, unexpectedly comforting. Leo began explaining the sensor system, his weathered finger tracing paths through the digital diagram, and she found herself leaning slightly forward, drawn into the elegant logic of mechanical systems. Neither of them noticed Maria watching. From her car across the street, hope rising quiet as dawn in her chest as she witnessed her daughter's first genuine engagement with the world in months. She was late for her shift at the hospital, but some moments demanded witness. This felt like one of them. The basic tool set appeared on Ava's passenger seat a week after the fuel sensor repair, its red metal case gleaming like a question mark in the morning sun. Through the shop window, Leo pretended to focus on paperwork, watching from the corner. Of his eye, as she discovered his gift, she sat there for a long time, one hand resting on the case's latches. Finally, she wheeled herself into his office, tool set balanced across her lap. "I can't accept this." "Not a gift," Leo said, not looking up from his invoice. "Payment for consultation." "Consultation? Your suggestion about the diagnostic sequence on the Henderson truck saved me 2 hours of work." He gestured to the tools. "Fair compensation for professional expertise." The silence that followed held the weight of pride wrestling with possibility. Leo had spent enough years navigating his own stubborn resistance to help to recognize it in others. He kept his eyes on his paperwork, giving her space to find her. "Way through the moment." "I don't know how to use half of these," Ava finally said, but her fingers traced the wrenches with unmistakable interest. "Could fix that." Leo turned a page, maintaining his studied casualness. "If you're interested in learning, shop's quiet on Tuesday mornings." Another long pause. Through the window, morning traffic hummed past, carrying people toward ordinary destinations. Inside the office, something less ordinary hung in the balance. Why? The question came sharp as a broken timing belt. Now Leo did look up, meeting her eyes with the same direct honesty he applied to diagnosing engines. "Because machines don't care what you look like, how you move, or what you've lost. They only care if you understand them, and you've got good instincts." Ava's hand tightened on the tool case. "I had good instincts on the track too. Look where that got me." "Different kind of race now," Leo said quietly. "Different kind of finish line." The words settled between them like metal filings finding their way to a magnet. Ava studied his face, searching perhaps for pity or ulterior motive. She found instead the weathered patience of someone who understood the geography of lost dreams. "Tuesdays," she said finally. It wasn't quite a question, wasn't quite agreement. Leo nodded, reached for his calendar. "9 work for you?" 8. A flash of her old determination surfaced. "If we're doing this, we do it right." The corner of Leo's mouth twitched. 8. "It is. Bring coffee. None of that fancy stuff, just black like motor oil." That first Tuesday, Leo started with the basics. Names of tools, proper handling, safety procedures. Ava absorbed it all with the same focused intensity she'd once applied to sprint techniques. Her questions were precise, technical, cutting straight to the heart of each concept. They worked in the back bay of the shop, away from customer traffic. Leo had cleared a workspace at wheelchair height. Though neither of them mentioned this accommodation, some courtesies worked better unacknowledged. "Hand position matters," Leo explained, demonstrating the proper grip on a socket wrench. "Like any other sport, form affects function." Ava flinched at the word sport, but her hands mimicked his position perfectly. By the end of that first session, she could identify every tool in the set blindfolded, running her fingers over their shapes like a pianist learning keys. The lessons continued, each Tuesday marking small victories. Oil changes became exercises in precision. Brake pad replacements turned into discussions of friction coefficients and material science. Through it all, Leo maintained the same steady patience, treating each question as worthy of careful consideration. Sometimes, when Ava was focused on a particularly challenging task, Leo caught glimpses of the athlete she'd been, the same intensity, the same drive for perfection, just channeled in a new direction. He never mentioned these observations. Some transformations needed space to occur unexamined. One morning, after Ava had successfully diagnosed a mysterious rattling in her van's undercarriage, Leo found a second coffee cup on his desk. Black. No fancy stuff. Neither of them mentioned this development either. But the next Tuesday, he had 2 cups waiting when she arrived. Small steps, Leo thought, watching her confidently disassemble a carburetor. Like learning to walk again after a crash, one careful movement at a time, each success building foundation for the next. He understood this dance of recovery, even if their injuries lived in different territories of loss. The idea came to Leo on a rainy Thursday afternoon, sparked by the rhythmic squeak of Ava's wheelchair as she leaned over a disassembled transmission. Something about the sound merged with his memory of race car suspension systems, of energy, transfer and load distribution, of forces absorbed and redirected. He found himself studying her movements when she wasn't looking, not with pity, but with the analytical eye of an engineer. The way she'd adapted her body mechanics to maintain balance while reaching for tools, the precise calculations behind each shift of weight. There was an athlete's efficiency in her motions. Even now, the first sketch happened almost without conscious thought, drawn on the back of an old invoice while he waited for parts delivery. Basic concepts from his racing days: carbon fiber layering, spring rates, energy return. His pencil moved with growing certainty, translating mechanical principles into human application. "What's that?" Ava's voice startled him. She'd wheeled up silently, coffee cups in her lap. Their Tuesday morning ritual, though this was Thursday. Leo started to slide the sketch under some paperwork, then stopped himself. Hiding it would only emphasize what they both worked so hard to treat as normal. Instead, he turned the paper toward her. "Just thinking about suspension systems," he said carefully. "About energy transfer and return ratios." Ava studied the drawing, her expression unreadable. The sketch showed a curved blade design, notations about carbon fiber weave patterns scattered around the margins. Anyone else might have missed the significance, but Ava had spent enough time around athletes to recognize a prosthetic running blade when she saw one. "That's not for a car," she said finally, her voice flat. "No," Leo agreed. "It's not." Silence filled his office like motor oil, thick and dark. Rain drummed against the windows, accompanying the quiet hum of the shop's air compressor. "I've seen the Paralympic runners," Ava said, still staring at the sketch. "Their blades cost more than this whole shop. Mass-produced ones do." Leo turned to a fresh page, began another drawing. "But the principles aren't complicated. Carbon fiber, proper layering, correct spring rates, all things we work with in racing." "We?" The word carried a weight heavier than all her tools combined. Leo's pencil paused. "Figure of speech," he said, then corrected himself. "No, actually it wasn't. We've been rebuilding engines together for 3 months now. You understand mechanical principles better than half the certified mechanics I know." "Understanding engines doesn't mean I can—" She stopped, hands gripping her wheelchair's arms. "Run again?" Leo finished quietly. "Maybe not. But maybe it does mean we can build something that could help you try." Ava's laugh held no humor. "With spare parts and racing knowledge, with engineering principles and determination." Leo pulled out his tablet, opened a folder he'd been building over the past week. "Look at this. Carbon fiber manufacturing techniques. Haven't changed much since my racing days. The materials are basically the same. The difference is in the application." Despite herself, Ava leaned forward as Leo swiped through diagrams and specifications. Her eyes, trained now in reading mechanical drawings, followed the flow of force lines and stress distributions. "It would take months," she said, but her tone had shifted from flat dismissal to cautious calculation. "Probably longer," Leo agreed. "We'd need to test different compositions, run stress analyses, adjust for your specific biomechanics." He paused, then added, "Good thing we've got Tuesday mornings free." Ava wheeled back slightly, creating distance. "This is crazy. You're talking about building professional medical equipment in an auto shop." "No," Leo said, pulling out a fresh sheet of paper. "I'm talking about applying proven mechanical principles to a new challenge. Like converting a streetcar for racing. Same basic. Vehicle, different application." He began sketching again, this time with quick, confident strokes. "See here, the energy return system isn't that different from high-performance shock absorbers. The carbon fiber layering follows the same principles we use in racing chassis. Design, Ava watched his hands move across the paper, creating possibility from empty space. Her own fingers twitched slightly, as if reaching for the pencil. "I can't pay for something like this," she said finally. Leo set down his pencil, met her eyes directly. "Good thing I'm not selling anything. This would be a collaboration, Ava. Your understanding of body mechanics, my knowledge of materials. Tuesday mornings, coffee black as motor oil, seeing where it leads." Rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, but in Leo's office, something else had begun to beat. The quiet pulse of hope, mechanical and human hearts finding a shared cadence. The first prototype failed spectacularly. 3 months of Tuesday mornings, countless cups of black coffee and dozens of carbon fiber layers, all ending in a sharp crack that echoed through the empty shop like a starter's pistol. Leo stood in the testing bay, holding the broken blade pieces, while Ava sat silent in her wheelchair. The failure point was clean, a diagonal break right where the stress calculations had predicted maximum load. Theory meeting reality with unforgiving precision. "Well," Leo said finally, laying the pieces on his workbench, "now we know exactly how not to do it." Ava wheeled closer, fingers reaching for the fractured edge. The layering pattern was wrong. Pattern was right. Material choice was wrong. Leo pulled out his tablet, began making notes. "We assumed the racing-grade carbon fiber would have enough flexibility. It doesn't. Too rigid for human biomechanics." The word human hung in the air between them. They'd spent so many weeks focused on the mechanical aspects, stress distributions, spring rates, load calculations, that it was easy to forget they were building more than just another high-performance part. Back to the drawing board. Ava's voice held a careful neutrality that Leo had come to recognize as her defense against disappointment. "Back to first principles," he corrected, pulling up their original designs. "In racing, we used to say every crash taught us something new about the car. Same principle applies here." He began sketching on the tablet, making adjustments based on the failure points. Ava watched, her own engineering knowledge, hard-won over months of study, allowing her to follow his modifications. "See here?" Leo highlighted a section of the design. "We were thinking like race car engineers, trying to eliminate all flex. But human movement needs controlled flexibility, like a good suspension system, rigid enough for stability, flexible enough for response. Like the difference between sprinting on a track versus running trails," Ava said quietly, surprising them both with the analogy. It was the first time she'd voluntarily referenced her running days since they'd started the project. Leo nodded, careful to maintain his focus on the tablet. "Exactly. Different surface, different requirements. We need to redesign with that in mind." They worked through the morning, the failed prototype serving as a tangible reminder of what wouldn't work. Leo sent emails to old racing contacts, asking about newer composite materials. Ava researched Paralympic blade designs, looking for patterns they might have missed. Around noon, Maria appeared with sandwiches. Her usual Tuesday delivery expanded to include their new Thursday work sessions. She took in the broken prototype, without comment, but her eyes held understanding as she watched her daughter bent over technical specifications, fully engaged, despite the setback. "You know," Leo said after lunch, studying the brake pattern again, "there might be something to learn from motorcycle racing here. They deal with similar flexibility requirements, rigid enough for power transfer but flexible enough for road feel." Ava looked up from her research. "Different materials, different layering technique." Leo pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "In cars, we layer for pure strength, but motorcycle frames need to work with the rider's body movements. More like a dance partner than a cage." "A dance partner," Ava repeated, testing the words. Her hands moved to her legs, an unconscious gesture she'd mostly abandoned in recent months. "I used to do ballet, you know, for cross-training. It was all about controlled movement, understanding your body's mechanics." Leo set down his pencil, giving her his full attention. These moments of sharing came rarely, precious as perfectly machined parts. The bar exercises, she continued, eyes distant with memory. They weren't about power or speed. They were about finding the right balance between strength and flexibility, about working with gravity instead of fighting it. Slowly, Leo pulled the design back up on his tablet. Maybe that's what we've been missing. We've been trying to build something to fight physics when we should be working with it. They spent the rest of the afternoon redesigning with this new perspective. The failed prototype sat on the workbench, no longer a symbol of defeat, but a necessary step in their education. Like a runner learning to fall before learning to fly, some lessons could only be taught through failure. As evening approached, Leo caught Ava studying the broken blade again, her expression thoughtful rather than disappointed. "Ready to try again?" he asked. "Tomorrow's Tuesday," she answered, which wasn't quite a yes, but carried the same weight of determination. "I'll bring the coffee." Success arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon, announced by the soft whisper of carbon fiber flexing perfectly under load. Leo watched the test readings scroll across his laptop screen, each number falling precisely where their calculations had predicted. Beside him, Ava leaned forward in her wheelchair, her breath held in a runner's anticipation of the starting gun. The blade component on the testing rig completed its 10,000th cycle without a single anomaly. In the language of engineering, this was poetry, pure function achieving perfect form. "Look at this energy return ratio," Ava said, her finger tracing the graph's upward curve. Months of study had given her the vocabulary to read triumph in. "Numerical data. It's actually higher than we projected," Leo nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "The motorcycle layering technique made the difference. That and your insight about the ballet movements." The prototype gleamed under the shop lights, its surface a deep black that seemed to absorb shadows. They'd adjusted the carbon fiber layers to mirror the natural flex patterns of a dancer's arc, creating a structure that worked with motion instead of merely enabling it. On the workbench lay the graveyard of their failures. Each broken attempt, a lesson learned. Each miscalculation, a step toward this moment. "Should we try the full weight test?" Ava's voice held carefully measured hope. Leo checked the readings one more time. "Numbers say we're ready, but it's your call." She wheeled closer to the testing rig, studying the blade that represented months of shared coffee, frustrated calculations, and steady persistence. Her hand reached out, fingers running along the curve they'd designed together. Her knowledge of body mechanics merged with his understanding of materials. "You know what Coach Thompson used to say before big races?" She didn't wait for Leo's response. He'd say, "Trust your training." "That's what this is, isn't it? All these months of work, it's been training." Leo began adjusting the rig for full weight simulation. Different track, same principle. The shop had grown quiet, most of the other mechanics gone for the day. Through the windows, long afternoon shadows stretched across the parking lot, painting everything in the golden light that photographers call magic hour. Inside, two people, who had each lost one kind of dream, prepared to test another. Full weight application in 3, 2, 1. Leo initiated the sequence. The blade flexed under the load, its curve adapting exactly as designed. On the screen, numbers continued their steady march through expected parameters. 10 seconds passed. 20, 30. Ava's hand found Leo's forearm, gripping, with the same intensity she'd once reserved for starting blocks. Neither spoke as the test continued, success measured in the steady stream of data and the quiet song of carbon fiber under stress. At the 5-minute mark, Leo began powering down the rig. "Want to see the final numbers?" But Ava was already reaching. For the blade, her movements deliberate as a sprinter's pre-race routine. She held it up to the light, examining the flex pattern they'd spent months perfecting. "It's not just about running, is it?" she said finally. "This whole time I thought we were trying to rebuild what I lost, but we're actually building something new." Leo thought about race cars converted for new purposes, about dreams redesigned rather than abandoned. That's generally how engineering it works. Take what you know, apply it differently, create something that didn't exist before. The blade caught the late afternoon sun, sending patterns dancing across the shop walls. In that moment, it looked less like a prosthetic and more like a bridge, spanning the gap between what was and what could be. "We'll need to run more tests," Leo said, already making notes for modifications. "Fine-tune the response rate, adjust the mounting system. And then we build its partner." He pulled up their original designs. "Can't run very far with just one leg." Ava laughed. A real laugh, the kind that had been absent from the shop since they'd started this journey. "One step at a time, coach." The nickname slipped out naturally, settling between them like a comfortable tool. Leo accepted it with a nod, understanding its weight. "I'll need to adjust my Tuesday schedule," Ava continued, still holding the blade. "Maybe add Thursdays permanently, if we're going to do this right." "Black coffee?" Leo asked, already knowing the answer. "Like motor oil," she confirmed, then added, "You know, I always hated the taste, even after all these months. Why didn't you say something?" She smiled, running her hand along the successful prototype one more time. "Some things are worth acquiring a taste for." Maria insisted on documenting the moment, her hands steady on her phone's camera despite the emotion in her eyes. The video would later become their most studied piece of data. Ava sitting on the workout bench in Leo's cleared storage room, morning, light streaming through high windows, two gleaming carbon fiber blades extending where her legs should be. "How's the fit?" Leo knelt beside her, checking the mounting system for the 100th time. They'd spent weeks perfecting the interface between flesh and carbon fiber, translating medical research into mechanical solutions. "Snug," Ava answered, running her hands along the connection points, like new track shoes before breaking them in. The comparison came easier now, past and present, no longer separated by an uncrossable divide. Leo made a final adjustment to the right blade's alignment. "Remember what we discussed. These respond differently than biological legs. You'll need to relearn my center of gravity, trust the spring rate, and let momentum work for me instead of fighting it." Ava's voice held the same focused calm she'd once used before races. "We've been over this, coach." The nickname had stuck, evolving from accident to acknowledgement. Leo accepted it with a nod, standing to give her space. He'd learned from racing that some moments belonged solely to the driver, no matter how many. Mechanics had helped build the vehicle. Maria moved to support her daughter, but Ava held up a hand. "I need to do this part myself, Mama." The room held its breath as Ava gripped the bench's edge, preparing for her first attempt at standing. Months of upper body training had rebuilt her strength, but theory was about to meet reality in the most fundamental way. Her first try ended before it began, balance refusing to come. The second attempt got her halfway up before uncertainty pulled her back. On the third try, she paused, closed her eyes, and did something that made Leo's throat tighten. She went through her old pre-race routine, rolling her shoulders, centering her breath. The fourth attempt brought her upright. Maria's camera captured it all, the slight wobble as Ava found her balance, the white-knuckled grip on the support bar they'd installed, the moment of pure wonder as she stood at her full height. For the first time in nearly a year. "How does it feel?" Leo asked, maintaining the professional tone they'd established during testing. Ava took a moment to answer, cataloging sensations with the precision she'd learned from months of mechanical analysis. "Spring rate feels correct. Weight distribution." She shifted slightly, testing. "Different than we calculated. I'm more forward on my toes." Leo made a note on his tablet. "We can adjust the mounting angle. Want to try a step first or make the modification?" "No adjustments." Ava's grip on the support bar loosened slightly. "I need to learn how they respond naturally before we start tweaking things." She took her first step, like a scientist conducting an experiment, careful and measured. The blade compressed under her weight exactly as designed, then released its stored energy. One step became two, each movement a study in physics and determination. Dios mío, Maria whispered, her phone temporarily forgotten as she watched her daughter walk. But Ava wasn't interested in walking. By her sixth step, she was testing the blade's spring response, bouncing slightly with each movement. By the 10th, she had established a rhythm that made Leo think of pistons finding their timing. The energy return, she said, wonder mixing with analytical observation. It's like having coiled springs instead of muscles. Not better or worse, just different, Leo finished. Like switching from a streetcar to a racing chassis. Same basic function, different execution. Ava nodded, then did something that made Maria's camera shake. She smiled, the full, unguarded smile that had been absent since the accident. Want to see something interesting? Before either of them could respond, she shifted her weight and took 3 quick steps forward. The blades responded instantly, converting force to motion with mathematical precision. On the 4th step, she pushed harder, testing the upper range of their design specifications. The resulting bounce carried her higher than any of them expected. For a fraction of a second, Ava Ruiz was airborne, suspended between past and future, between what was lost and what might be possible. She landed awkwardly, Leo and Maria both moving to catch her, but she caught herself on the support bar, laughing. Did you see that? The energy transfer was just like we calculated, but feeling it, she shook her head, wonder replacing analysis. It's like learning to run all over again, but with new rules. Maybe that's enough for today, Maria suggested, maternal concern warring with joy. But Leo saw the look in Ava's eyes, the same look he'd worn before his first race, when possibility overwhelmed fear. 5 more minutes, he said. Let's get some more data while her muscles are fresh. Ava shot him a grateful glance, already adjusting her stance for another attempt. On the camera's screen, the video continued recording. A girl, learning to fly with mechanical wings, one calculated step at a time. The sound of carbon fiber failing under stress had its own signature, a sharp crack like winter ice breaking, followed by a silence heavy with consequences. Leo heard it from across the training room, his body responding before his mind fully processed what was happening. 23 years of racing instincts sent him moving toward Ava before she hit the ground. He wasn't fast enough. The left blade had sheared clean through during a high-speed turn, sending Ava sprawling across the practice mat. The broken prosthetic lay in 2 pieces, its failure point glinting under fluorescent lights like an accusation. "Don't move," Leo ordered, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone used to crash scenarios. His hands moved quickly, checking for injuries while his mind catalogued possible failure points in their design. "I'm fine," Ava insisted, but her voice shook with more than just the impact. Blood trickled from where her palms had scraped the mat, and her right side was already showing signs of bruising. Maria, who had taken to watching their training sessions from a corner of the room, was already calling the doctor. Her voice carried the steady, professional tone of an ER nurse, but her free hand trembled as she helped Ava into a sitting position. Leo collected the broken blade, his experienced eyes reading the story of its failure. The carbon fiber layers had delaminated under lateral stress, a possibility they'd calculated for but thought they'd engineered against. Theory and reality, once again proving their difference. "It's my fault," he said quietly, turning the broken pieces in his hands. "I should have accounted for the torsional force during turns. We tested for vertical load, but the lateral stress—" "Stop!" Ava's voice cut through his self-recrimination. "We both reviewed those calculations. We both signed off on the design." She tried to push herself up, winced at the pressure on her scraped palms. "Besides, I was pushing harder than we agreed for initial testing." The doctor arrived within 20 minutes, her examination thorough but ultimately reassuring. No serious injuries, just bruises and abrasions. The physical wounds would heal quickly. The other damage, to confidence, to momentum, to the fragile trust they'd built with each small success that would take longer to assess. Later that evening, after Maria had insisted on taking Ava home despite her protests, Leo sat in his office, studying the broken blade under his desk lamp. Each layer of carbon fiber told part of the story. The initial stress point, the propagation of the failure, the final catastrophic separation. He'd seen similar patterns in crashed race cars, had learned to read disaster in the way materials gave way under extreme conditions, but this felt different. In racing, a crashed car meant a delayed victory. Here the stakes wore human faces. The shop phone rang, startling him from his analysis. "Ava's number. I've been doing calculations," she said without preamble. "If we modify the fiber orientation in the lower third and add a secondary reinforcement..." "Layer, Ava," he interrupted gently, "it's almost midnight. You should be resting." "I'll rest when we solve this." Papers rustled in the background. The failure occurred at 37 degrees of lateral rotation. If we adjust the layer pattern to account for multidirectional stress, Leo found himself reaching for his tablet, pulling up their design files. The additional reinforcement would add weight, might affect the energy return ratio. So we compensate by adjusting the curve geometry. I've been studying the blade patterns used by Paralympic sprinters in corner conditions. Their approach to lateral stability. Hold on. Leo's fingers moved across his tablet, making notes. "Let me pull up those specs." They worked through the night, their voices carrying across phone lines the same way they'd once called out timing splits and lap speeds. Technical terms mixed with deeper concerns, each calculation a step away from failure and back toward possibility. Around 3 in the morning, Maria's voice came faintly through Ava's line. "Mija, you need to sleep." "Tomorrow's Tuesday," Ava said, the words carrying the weight of their shared routine. "I'll bring coffee." "No." Leo's response was firm. "You rest. Let those scrapes heal. I'll work up some preliminary designs based on our notes. We'll review. Then when you're stronger." A pause, then. "Thursday?" "Thursday," he agreed. "But only if the doctor clears you." After hanging up, Leo stayed at his desk, the broken blade still catching light from his lamp. In racing, they said every crash taught you something if you were willing to learn. He picked up the failure point, fingers tracing the shear pattern. That had nearly cost them everything. "All right," he muttered to the empty shop, pulling up a fresh design file. "Let's learn." The article appeared in the local paper on a Sunday morning, tucked between coverage of high school sports and a feature on downtown renovation. Local mechanic and former track star build hope from carbon fiber. Someone had tipped off the reporter, probably one of Leo's regular customers who'd noticed the changes in the shop's back room. The story itself was simple enough, a brief recap of Ava's accident, a mention of Leo's racing background, and a carefully worded description of their project. But it was the photograph that caught people's attention. Ava at Leo's workbench, both of them bent over a technical drawing, their expressions showing the focused intensity of people building something larger than themselves. By Monday morning, the shop's answering machine was full. 3 medical supply companies, Leo said, sorting through the messages during their Tuesday session. 2 prosthetics manufacturers, a carbon fiber specialist from the university engineering department. He paused at the next one. And Coach Thompson, Ava's hand stilled on the redesigned blade she'd been examining. "What did he say?" "Asked if we could use access to the school's track for testing. Said something about proper running surfaces being crucial for accurate data collection." The offer hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and apprehension. They'd been conducting all their tests in the shop's modified back room, telling themselves it was enough, but proper athletic facilities... "We're not ready," Ava said, but her fingers traced the blade's curve with newfound purpose. "No," Leo agreed, "but we're closer than we were." He pulled up their latest design modifications on his tablet. The university engineer left his direct number, said he's been working with composite materials for 20 years. What do you think? Leo considered the question carefully, remembering his own transition from solo racer to team driver. I think sometimes progress means accepting help from people who know things we don't. The next few weeks brought changes to their quiet routine. The university engineer, Dr. Chen, spent a full afternoon examining their design approach, his enthusiasm growing with each technical detail they shared. "This is brilliant," he kept saying, "completely unorthodox, but brilliant." He brought with him access to the university's materials testing lab and 3 graduate students, eager to run stress analyses. The data they produced filled gaps in Leo and Ava's calculations, confirming some theories and challenging others. The medical supply companies offered less welcome input, mostly attempts to buy their design or suggest mass production alternatives. Leo fielded these calls with the diplomatic skills he'd learned handling difficult racing sponsors. "We're not looking to commercialize," he'd say. "This is a custom project." But it was the community's response that proved most surprising. Local businesses began offering support in unexpected ways. The gym where Ava had once trained provided free access to their rehabilitation equipment. A composite materials supplier in the next town over donated high-grade carbon fiber sheets. Even the coffee shop where they got their morning fuel insisted on providing their drinks on the house. "It's not charity," the owner said when Ava tried to protest. "It's investment in something important." Coach Thompson proved true to his word about the track access, even arranging for it to be available during off hours when Ava felt more comfortable testing. He watched their first session from the bleachers, his presence both welcome and nerve-wracking. "Your form's different," he called out after watching Ava make several careful laps. "But your determination, that hasn't changed a bit." The local paper's article had found its way to several online platforms, drawing attention from unexpected quarters. A Paralympic coach from 3 states over sent detailed feedback on blade dynamics. A retired engineering professor offered to review their calculations. A group of local athletes organized a fundraiser for better testing equipment. "It's getting bigger than us," Ava observed one Thursday afternoon, watching Leo coordinate delivery of a new composite curing oven donated by a manufacturing firm. "Is that okay?" Leo thought about his racing days, about the difference between driving solo and having a team in your corner. "Depends," he said, making space for the equipment. "Does it change what we're trying to do here?" Ava considered this, her hand resting on their latest prototype. "No," she said finally. "The goal's the same, just more people helping us reach it." "Then maybe it's not getting bigger than us," Leo suggested. "Maybe we're getting bigger to match it." The paper's article, now framed on the shop wall, caught the afternoon light. In the photograph, they looked like any other mechanic and athlete focused on their work. But the community had seen something more, a story about transformation, about taking broken pieces and building something new. "Besides," Leo added, checking the settings on their new equipment, "tomorrow's Tuesday." Ava smiled, understanding all the layers of meaning in those words. "I'll bring the coffee." "Let me guess," Leo said. "Black as motor oil." "Actually," Ava replied, "I was thinking of trying something new. Sometimes change isn't such a bad thing." The photos surfaced during a materials inventory, tucked inside an old racing manual Leo had pulled from his office shelves. They spilled across his desk like autumn leaves, glossy prints from another lifetime, each one capturing a moment from his racing career. Leo Martinez in his prime, firesuit pristine, standing beside cars bearing numbers and sponsors long since forgotten. Ava picked them up before he could sweep them away, her eyes widening at the younger version of her mentor. "You never said you raced NASCAR." "Nationwide Series," Leo corrected automatically, the old habit of precision asserting itself. "Never made it to the Cup Series. That was the plan, but—" He trailed off, attention caught by one particular image. The photograph showed him at Daytona, one hand resting on his car's hood, the other holding his helmet. The photographer had caught him looking toward the track with an expression Ava recognized, the same focused anticipation she'd once worn before major meets. "You were good," she said, studying the trophy celebrations captured in several shots. "Really good." Leo's fingers traced the edge of the Daytona photo, feeling the weight of memories it carried. Good enough to be dangerous, not good enough to be safe. The story emerged slowly, drawn out by Ava's careful questions and genuine understanding. The promising start in local races, the quick rise through regional competitions, the sponsors who saw in young Leo Martinez the next great Latino driver. Then Daytona, the high-banked turns, the split-second decision that saved his life, but cost him something else. The crash wasn't bad by racing standards, Leo explained, sorting through the photos. Car did its job. Safety equipment worked perfectly. I walked away without a scratch. He paused, finding the last photo ever taken of him in a fire suit. But something broke anyway. Not bones or muscle, something deeper. Fear, Ava said quietly, understanding in her voice. Not of getting hurt, but of not being what I was before, Leo finished. Every time I got back in a car after that, my hands would shake. Not much, probably nobody else could see it, but I could feel it. And in racing, that hesitation. He shook his head. That's all it takes. Ava wheeled closer to his desk, picking up another photo. This one showed Leo's pit crew celebrating. After a victory, their joy frozen in time. Did you miss it after you quit? Every day, Leo admitted. Not the speed or the wins, though. I missed the feeling of working at the edge of what's possible, of taking something ordinary, a car, an engine, a dream, and pushing it past what anyone thought it could do. Understanding dawned in Ava's. Expression. Is that what this is? She gestured to their workshop, to the prototypes and designs that had consumed their past months. Another way of finding that edge. Leo considered this, looking around at what their project had become. The new testing equipment hummed quietly in the corner, its digital displays showing the results of their latest analyses. On the walls, technical drawings shared space with the newspaper article that had brought them community support. Everything here represented another kind of race, not against other drivers, but against the limits of what they thought possible. Maybe, he said finally. But it's different this time. In racing, I was always trying to prove something. He picked up their latest blade design. This is about building something, not just the prosthetics, but something larger. Ava studied him for a moment, then wheeled over to her workstation. She returned with a small object that made Leo's breath catch. Her old starting block anchor pin, worn smooth by countless races. Coach Thompson gave me this after my first state. A championship, she said, placing it beside the racing photos. Told me to keep it as a reminder that every finish line is just another starting block in disguise. She met Leo's eyes. Maybe that's true for pit walls, too. The afternoon light slanted through the shop windows, casting long shadows across Leo's desk. The photos seemed different now, less like memories of what he'd lost and more like steps that had led him here. Each race, each decision, even the fear that had ended his driving career had given him skills they now used every day. There's one difference, Leo said, gathering the photos carefully. In racing, I always worked alone, even with a hole. The team behind me in the car, it was just me and my demons. And now? Leo smiled, tucking the photos back into the manual, not hiding them this time, just putting them in their proper place. Now I've got a better co-driver. Ava grinned. Already, reaching for their latest designs. Good thing, too, because I think I just figured out how to solve our lateral stability issue. Together, they bent over the drawings, two athletes who had found new ways to chase impossible dreams. The racing photos watched from their shelf, witnesses to the strange. Ways past and present sometimes merged to create unexpected futures. The training schedule hung in both their workspaces, Leo's office and Ava's bedroom, its detailed grid mapping out the next 8 weeks in 15-minute increments. Every cell represented a carefully calculated step toward their goal. Each hour a building block of possibility. Coach Thompson had helped design it, bringing decades of athletic experience to their engineering precision. "It's like rebuilding an engine," Leo explained to Maria one morning, pointing to the schedule's color-coded sections. "You can't just assemble all the parts at once. There's a sequence, a rhythm to it." The schedule divided their days into distinct phases: morning sessions for mechanical adjustments and blade testing, afternoons for physical conditioning, evenings for technical refinements. Numbers filled the margins: target speeds, stress tolerances, recovery times, each one a milestone on their journey back to the track. Ava attacked the schedule with the same intensity she'd once brought to Olympic qualifying preparation. Her days began before sunrise in the gym, rebuilding strength lost during months of inactivity. By the time she reached Leo's shop at 8, her arms already ached from weight training, but she never mentioned it. "Form check," she'd say instead, strapping on the latest version of their blades. They'd refined the mounting system to allow quick adjustments, learning from each session's data. Leo would stand ready with his tablet, recording every movement, every reaction of carbon fiber under stress. The university's help had proved invaluable. Dr. Chen's team developed computer models that predicted stress patterns they hadn't considered. "Look here," he'd say, pointing to heat maps of force distribution. "The energy return isn't just vertical. There's a rotational component we can optimize." Their training sessions attracted a growing audience. Other athletes from the track team would pause their workouts to watch Ava work through her progressions. Young engineering students showed up with notebooks, studying the intersection of human movement and mechanical design. Even some of Leo's old racing contacts came by, drawn by rumors of something innovative happening in a small-town auto shop. "Remember," Leo would say before each run, "we're not trying to replicate natural movement. We're creating something new. Let the blades teach you how they want to move." Ava learned to translate her runner's instincts into this new language of carbon fiber and kinetic energy. Each session brought small breakthroughs: the perfect angle for corner work, the precise pressure needed for maximum energy return, the sweet spot where blade and body moved as one. The schedule tracked her progress in cold numbers, lap times improving, consistency building, confidence growing. But it couldn't capture the intangible moments. The first time she laughed during a sprint, the morning she instinctively leaned into a turn without thinking, the day she stopped seeing the blades as prosthetics and started feeling them as extensions of herself. "Your stride pattern is changing," Coach Thompson noted during one evening session. "Not better or worse than before, just different. Like you're learning to speak a new dialect of running." The schedule evolved with them, adapting to discoveries and setbacks. Some days required more rest than planned. Others opened unexpected avenues for improvement. Leo added a column for equipment modifications, tracking how each tiny adjustment affected performance. "It's like tuning a race car," he explained to Dr. Chen. "You don't just set it up once and expect peak performance. You adjust constantly, learning from each lap, each condition." Maria watched it all with growing amazement, seeing her daughter transform not back into who she'd been, but into someone new, someone who combined an athlete's grace with an engineer's understanding. The schedule on Ava's wall gained new notations in her neat handwriting, observations about blade response, ideas for mechanical refinements, questions about physics principles she was learning to master. One evening, after a particularly successful training session, Ava wheeled up to Leo's desk with a proposal. "We need to add something to the schedule." Leo looked up from his modifications log. "What did you have in mind?" "Teaching time." She pulled out a notebook filled with detailed drawings. "I've had 3 people ask me about custom prosthetics this week alone. If we're going to do this right, we need to document everything we're learning, not just for me, but for others." Leo studied her sketches, clear, technical illustrations that showed how far she'd come from those first curious questions about engine parts. The schedule hung behind her, its grid now marked with highlights and annotations, a record of their shared journey. Thursdays at 4, he suggested. After blade testing but before evening adjustments? Ava nodded, already making notes. Perfect. I'll bring the coffee. Still black as motor oil. She smiled, remembering their early morning ritual that had started all this. No, some things changed for the better. The medal from Leo's last race sat on his desk the morning before the Paralympic qualifying event, its surface dulled by years of dust. He'd pulled it out of storage the night before, driven by memories that wouldn't let him sleep. Third place, Daytona, the race before everything changed. His fingers traced the engraved date, feeling the weight of decisions made in moments of fear. You're here early. Ava's voice startled him. She wasn't due for another hour. Their final pre-competition equipment check scheduled for 8. Couldn't sleep, he admitted, not hiding the medal as he might have once done. You? Same. She wheeled closer, noticed the coffee cups on his desk. 2 cups? Figured you'd show up. He handed her one, noticed her hands weren't entirely steady. Regular, not black. Thought we could both use the comfort today. The shop felt different in the pre-dawn quiet, filled with the ghosts of their journey. Every tool, every prototype, every failed attempt had led them to this moment. Tomorrow, Ava would compete in her first Paralympic qualifying event, their homegrown innovation going up against professionally designed equipment. I keep running the numbers, Ava said, pulling out her tablet. The stress analyses, the response rates, the energy return calculations, everything checks out, but... She stopped, frustrated by fears too complex for equations. But it's not just about the numbers anymore, Leo finished. He picked up the medal, held it where she could see. Want to know something I've never told anyone about this race? Ava set down her coffee, giving him her full attention. The morning light was just beginning to creep through the shop windows, painting everything in shades of possibility and doubt. I was faster in practice, Leo said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. Had better lap times than the eventual winner. Better fuel strategy, too. But when the green flag dropped, he set the medal down between them. I held back. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but I felt it. That tiny hesitation in every turn, that fraction of doubt. What happened? Finish third. Respectable finish. Good points for the championship. Everyone said I'd driven smart, conservative. The memory still carried its sting. But I knew. In here, he tapped his chest. Knew I'd let fear make the decision. Ava was quiet for a moment, processing. Her hands moved to the carbon fiber blades. Leaning against Leo's desk, their latest and best version, refined by months of testing and adjustment. I'm not afraid of failing, she said finally. I'm afraid of succeeding. Leo waited, recognizing the need to let some revelations find their own pace. If this works, she continued, if we prove that a mechanic and a broken runner can build something that competes with professional equipment, everything changes, not just for me, but for others. The responsibility of that is terrifying, Leo finished. Like holding the lead in a race and suddenly realizing what's at stake. The shop was lighter now, morning sun revealing the organized chaos of their workspace. Tools and testing equipment shared space with medical reference books and biomechanical studies. On the walls, their technical drawings had evolved from rough sketches to precise engineering documents. You know what I keep thinking about. Ava's voice had found new strength. That first cup of coffee, black as motor oil, completely horrible. She smiled at the memory. I was so determined to prove I didn't need help, didn't need connection. But that awful coffee led to learning about engines, which led to understanding materials, which led to... She gestured at the blades. Leo picked up his medal again, really looking at it for the first time in years. Sometimes the race you think you're running isn't the one that matters. Is that why you kept this? Ava nodded toward the medal. To remind you of what you lost. I thought so for a long time. Leo stood, walked to the case holding their prototype progression. Now I think maybe I kept it, to remind me that there's always another way to chase a dream. Sometimes you just need a different vehicle." Ava wheeled to join him, looking at their creation's evolution. "So tomorrow we find out if our vehicle's ready for its first real race." Leo turned to face her. "But here's what I learned. Too late in racing. The outcome matters less than being willing to push all the way to the edge of possible. No holding back." Ava's voice held both question and answer. "No holding back," Leo confirmed. He picked up their final checklist. "Now let's make sure these blades are ready to show the world what's possible when fear loses to determination." The medal caught the morning sun, its tarnished surface reflecting light differently now, less like a reminder of what was lost, more like a starting line for what might be found. The starting line photo would later hang in both their workspaces, Leo's office and Ava's new training room. Captured moments before the Paralympic qualifying heat, it showed Ava in her racing stance, carbon fiber blades gleaming under stadium lights. But it was her expression that made the image remarkable. Not the familiar tension of her old race days, but something calmer, more centered, the look of someone who had already won something more important than a race. The morning had started in familiar ritual. Leo checking each blade component with practiced hands, Ava going through her warm-up routine, Maria in the stands, wearing her red scarf despite the warm spring day, Coach Thompson pacing the sidelines, clipboard forgotten in his hands as he watched his former star athlete prepare for a different kind of comeback. "Remember," Leo said, making his final adjustments, "these aren't just prosthetics, they're precision instruments. Listen to what they tell you about the track surface, about your speed, about the edge of possible." Ava finished, sharing a smile with him. "You sound like a coach." Funny how that happens. He stood back, eyes scanning their creation one last time. "Everything's set. The rest is up to you." The qualifying official had raised an eyebrow at their equipment forms. Custom built in an auto shop. But the university's certification and Dr. Chen's technical documentation had satisfied the regulations. Now their blades would face their ultimate test. Not just performance, but legitimacy in the eyes of the athletic world. Other competitors warmed up around them, their high-end prosthetics carrying familiar brand names. A few cast curious glances at Ava's distinctive blades, word having spread about the mechanic and athlete who'd engineered their own solution. One runner even came over to look closer, professional interest obvious in her questions about the design. "Different layering pattern than standard," she observed, athlete and engineer blending in her assessment. "How's the energy return ratio?" "Want to find out?" Ava's response carried the friendly challenge of competitors who respect each other's drive. The stadium filled slowly, mostly family and friends of competitors at this level of qualifying. But there were others too. Leo's former racing colleagues, engineering students from the university, local athletes curious about the auto shop project that had grown into something more. Dr. Chen sat with his graduate team, sensors ready to gather performance data. "Runners to your marks." The familiar command sent a hush through the crowd. Ava settled into her blocks, modified to work with the blades, another innovation born of necessity. Leo watched from the sidelines, unconsciously, assuming the stance he'd once taken before crucial pit stops, ready to act, forced to wait. Set. In that suspended moment before the start, Ava felt the blades become part of her. Not replacements for what she'd lost, but instruments of transformation, like a pianist's keys or a sculptor's chisel. Each carbon fiber layer represented hours of work, failed attempts and renewed determination. The starting pistol cracked. Leo had watched thousands of race starts, from driver's seat and pit wall alike, but nothing prepared him for this moment. Ava's launch was nearly perfect, the blades responding exactly as designed. Their countless adjustments and refinements played out in real time as she found her rhythm down the track. The first turn would be crucial. They'd spent weeks perfecting the blade response for lateral forces, But theory and practice didn't always agree. Ava entered the curve with the precision of someone who understood both athletics and engineering, letting the carbon fiber work with her body's motion instead of fighting it. Coming out of the turn, she was third in a field of 8. The leader's professional equipment showed in the smoothness of her stride, but Ava's unique running style, adapted to their custom design, kept her in contention. Down the back straight, the gap began to close. Leo found himself mentally calculating split times, energy return rates, stress factors, anything to keep his hands from shaking. Beside him, Coach Thompson had given up any pretense of writing notes, his attention fixed on his former student's transformation. The final 100 meters unfolded like a demonstration of everything they'd learned. Ava ran not like someone trying to reclaim past glory, but like an athlete who had found a new way to express the joy of pure motion. The blades responded perfectly, each stride carrying the precision of engineering and the artistry of sport. She crossed the finish line in second place. The time on the board showed Olympic qualifying standard, but it was Ava's smile, fierce, triumphant, and aimed straight at Leo, that told the real story. In that moment, they weren't mechanic and athlete, mentor and student, but co-creators of something that transcended all those labels. "Well," Leo said later, after the medals and measurements and media questions, "I guess we've got some data to analyze." Ava laughed, the sound carrying all the joy their long journey had earned. "Tomorrow's Tuesday?" "Tomorrow's Tuesday," he confirmed, "but maybe we skip the motor oil coffee. Some traditions deserve retirement." The new sign appeared above the shop door on a quiet Thursday morning. Ruiz and Martinez Custom Prosthetics and Engineering. Below it, in smaller letters, Auto Repair by Appointment. The change marked more than just a shift in business focus. It represented a transformation of possibility itself. The first request came 3 days after the qualifying event. A former college sprinter, now a below-knee amputee, drove 4 hours just to talk with them. He brought X-rays, medical reports, and something more valuable, hope, sparked by videos of Ava's race that had spread through the adaptive sports community. "What gets me," he said, watching Leo and Ava analyze his gait patterns, "is that you didn't just copy existing designs. You started from scratch, thinking about how bodies and machines work together." They had converted the shop's back room into a proper assessment space, combining Leo's mechanical expertise with Ava's growing knowledge of biomechanics. Medical textbooks shared shelf space with engineering manuals, while their walls displayed both anatomical diagrams and stress analysis charts. "Every body moves differently," Ava explained, making notes on her tablet. "Even before my accident, no 2 runners had exactly the same stride pattern. Why should prosthetics be any different?" Leo observed from his workbench, pride mixing with amazement at how naturally she had stepped into this teaching role. The college athlete listened intently as she explained their design philosophy, asking questions that showed he grasped both the technical and human aspects of their approach. The university's involvement expanded. Dr. Chen arranged for graduate students to intern at the shop, learning to apply engineering principles to human mobility. In return, Leo and Ava gained access to advanced testing equipment and research resources. Their workshop became a unique hybrid of garage, laboratory, and healing space. "It's like a pit crew for the human body," one of Leo's old racing friends observed during a visit. "Same precision, same attention to detail, but instead of shaving seconds off lap times, you're giving people back their motion." Their client list grew steadily, each case presenting unique challenges. A dancer needed prosthetics with different energy return properties than a runner. A recreational basketball player required specific lateral stability characteristics. Each solution taught them something new, adding to their expanding knowledge base. Maria watched it all with quiet joy, particularly the moments when Ava worked with younger athletes. Her daughter had found not just recovery, but purpose, transforming her understanding of loss into a tool for helping others rebuild their dreams. "Remember that first morning?" Maria asked Leo one day as they watched Ava demonstrate blade responsiveness to a young Paralympic hopeful, when she sat in her van for hours, afraid to come inside. Leo nodded, recalling the quiet desperation of those early days. Now look at her, teaching others what she learned about courage and carbon fiber. They had kept their Tuesday morning ritual, though it evolved to accommodate their growing practice. Coffee was still part of the routine, but now it fueled research sessions and design reviews. The auto repair bay remained operational. Leo insisted on maintaining that connection to their beginnings, but most of their time went to prosthetic development. The technical breakthrough that had started with running blades expanded into other applications. They developed specialized attachments for different activities, each design incorporating their unique blend of athletic insight and engineering precision. Their waiting list grew longer, but they refused to rush their process. "Every case is custom," Leo would explain to new clients. "Like building a race car, you have to understand exactly how it'll be used, what conditions it'll face, what the driver needs to perform at their best." Ava had taken to documenting everything, creating detailed guides that combined technical specifications with practical advice. "It's not just about the prosthetics," she wrote in their client handbook. "It's about understanding that adaptation isn't surrender, it's innovation." One evening, after finishing a particularly challenging design session, they sat in Leo's office reviewing their project board. Photos of successful clients shared space with technical drawings and research notes. In one corner, Leo's old racing medal hung beside Ava's Paralympic qualifying time slip, their shared journey marked in metal and paper. "You know what I've been thinking?" Ava said, scrolling through their current case files. "Every person who comes here is really looking for the same thing we were, not just replacement parts, but a way to redefine what's possible." Leo looked at their new sign through the office window, remembering the long path from that first cup of coffee to this moment. "Good thing we've got some experience with that." "Speaking of experience," Ava grinned, pulling up a new design file. "Wait until you see what I'm thinking for mountain biking applications. The energy return calculations are fascinating." Leo leaned forward, already seeing the possibilities. In her preliminary sketches, their work had become more than a business or even a mission. It was an ongoing exploration of human potential, measured in carbon fiber and courage. The new medal caught different light than racing trophies or track championships. Hanging in their shared workshop, its Paralympic silver seemed to glow with its own kind of pride. Less about victory and more about validation, proof that broken dreams sometimes reassemble into something stronger than the original. 6 months after the qualifying event, Ruiz and Martinez's custom prosthetics and engineering had become something neither of them had imagined that first morning over bitter coffee. The auto shop still hummed with activity, but now engine diagnostics shared space with gait analysis, and tool cabinets stood beside cases of carbon fiber components. "Ready for today's client?" Leo asked, checking their testing equipment one last time. Their appointment calendar was full these days, each slot representing someone's journey toward redefined possibility. Almost. Ava made a final adjustment. To her own blades, the latest iteration of their ongoing refinement process. Just updating the comparison data, new clients always feel better seeing how the prototypes evolved. They had kept every version arranged chronologically along one wall. From the first failed attempt to the competition-grade models, each prototype told part of their story. But it wasn't just their story anymore. Other dreams had joined the narrative. The dancer who had recently returned to the stage, the veteran learning to run with his grandchildren, the young athlete discovering that different didn't mean less. The morning sun streamed through windows still decorated with that first newspaper article, now framed alongside others that documented their growing impact. But it was the handwritten notes from clients that meant the most, each one testimony to The power of believing that limitations were just engineering problems waiting for solutions. You know what I learned from all this? Ava said, wheeling toward their client meeting room. It was never about getting back to who I was before. It was about discovering who I could become. Leo smiled, remembering their long journey from that first hesitant morning. Sometimes the best innovations come from starting over with fresh eyes and terrible coffee, Ava added with a grin. A familiar sound caught their attention, the shop's front doorbell chiming its welcome to another visitor, another story, another chance to prove that broken paths sometimes led to better destinations. Ready? Leo asked, though he already knew the answer. Ava nodded, her eyes bright with the same determination that had once powered her around tracks, but tempered now with hard-won wisdom and shared purpose. Always ready, coach. We've got possibilities. To engineer. Together they moved to meet their next challenge, leaving behind the quiet workshop where two broken dreams had somehow built something unbreakable. The new medal caught one last gleam of morning light, its silver surface reflecting not just achievement, but the deeper gift they'd discovered. That sometimes the strongest wings are built from fallen dreams, and the best finish lines are really just different kinds of starting blocks.